Welcome into OutKick the show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. I hope all of you are having fantastic Wednesdays, wherever you may be across this great land. We got a lot to dive into. The vice presidential debate last night. Some of you may have seen me, Tommy Lahren, Morgan Ortagus, Pete Hegseth reacting live on Fox Nation. If you are Fox Nation subscribers, I believe it is still up. Over an hour of discussion from VP debate-related content that all of you can go check out. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you everything that I thought here, just like I told you everything that I thought on the debate on Clay and Buck earlier in the day as well. So, several different things that I thought were instrumental, but I'm also going to talk about the NBA opening its preseason in Abu Dhabi. That is the Middle East. Doug Emhoff allegedly slapped a woman in 2012 in addition to impregnating his nanny. Starting to think this dude may not be a great dude. But I want to start with everything having to do with the VP debate. If you had been told for months, as has been the case since Donald Trump elevated J.D. Vance as his VP nominee in July of 2024, that J.D. Vance was an awful, Handmaid's Tale, insane right-wing lunatic who was going to drag you by your hair outside your house because he had you on a national abortion registry if you decided not to have a baby, if you had been told that he was an awful human being, that he was weird, as Tim Walz tried to portray him, I can only imagine how unbelievably stunned you were to watch J.D. Vance stand there and deliver a command performance waxing Tim Walz every which direction, as well as the two lunatic moderators, all in the space of an hour and a half. To me, there were a couple of things that I thought stood out that are most significant. One was that J.D. Vance destroyed the caricature of him. And a lot of people watching said, oh, I like this guy. He seems normal, seems like a dad of three. He gave a shout out to his incredibly intelligent Yale Law School graduate wife who has worked in big law firms. I know and how amazing she does as a mom. I know that lifestyle because I'm not that much different in age than J.D. Vance. My wife went to Vanderbilt Law School. We have 3 kids that we have raised, and having a job while being a mom is way tougher than having a job while being a dad. It just is. And anybody who doesn't see that, I think, frankly, is a moron. And J.D. Vance laid out exactly what he's trying to do. Now, I can tell you, and if you are fortunate enough to have multiple kids like I do, days can be chaotic. You've got a lot of different moving parts every single moment. I'm going to do this show, and then I've got an 8th grade football game to get to. And then tomorrow, or Friday, I'm taking my kid to go see WWE SmackDown for his birthday, my 10-year-old. And then on Saturday, we got a birthday party to get to and a lot of sporting events and everything else. And you guys know, if you have kids, what that style, what that period of your life is like. And so I thought, far from being weird, J.D. Vance seemed like a normal dad of 3 on that stage. I also thought, if you were analyzing this from what does the VP mean for the presidential perspective, the choice you make as vice president is arguably the most important choice you make as a presidential candidate, because this is the person that would take over in the event something happened to you, which has particular resonance given we've had 2 assassination attempts against Donald Trump in the past few months. Donald Trump selected J.D. Vance, who, whatever your thoughts are on his political perspective, Marine, a state college, GI Bill, Ohio State graduate, Yale Law School grad, kind of the American dream, grew up without a father in his home, was raised to a large extent by his grandmother because his mom was a drug addict. This is the opposite of a guy who was raised with a silver spoon in his mouth. And I thought if you were out there and you were watching this and you were saying, okay, what do you think about the VP debate? Trump picked an incredibly intelligent, accomplished, much younger guy to be his vice president. That reflects well on Trump that he was willing to make that choice. He didn't try to find somebody who was going to be less effective, less intelligent than him. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris went and picked Tim Walz, who I think is less intelligent than Kamala Harris. And in fact, I think Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is the dumbest president and vice president combo ticket that we've ever seen. And if you saw the meme going around, it was Barack Obama saying, I need someone dumber than me to be my vice president. He then picks Joe Biden. Joe Biden says, I need somebody dumber than me to be my vice president. He then picks Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris says, I need someone dumber than me to be my vice president. She picks Tim Walz. Since Barack Obama, I think it's fair to say every Democrat ticket has gotten dumber, and this is the dumbest one with Kamala Harris and with Tim Walz. So I think this reflects really poorly on Kamala. And you are starting to hear, because Tim Walz is not very accomplished, he's not very intelligent. Frankly, I don't think he's able to do the job of president of the United States. I don't think Kamala is either, but I think she would be better and more qualified than he. Now, you are starting to hear a little bit of whispers. Starting to hear a little bit of a whisper out there of, oh, why did Kamala pick Tim Walz? It's just a whisper right now. But I think that's going to grow into a crescendo as it becomes clearer and clearer that Kamala should have picked Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, and would have picked him, but for the fact that there is a huge anti-Semitic base of the Democrat Party that was not going to accept a Jewish VP candidate. Okay? So I think that this selection of Walz reflects poorly on Kamala. I think it reflects very powerfully on Trump that this is the choice he made. Now, if this race is going to come down to the Big Ten states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, which I believe it is, then to a large extent, the debate is a reflection of which candidate is going to strike people as more Midwestern normal. J.D. Vance from Ohio or Tim Walz from Minnesota. The idea out there when Kamala selected Walz was, oh, he's a former football coach, former teacher. He's going to connect in a big way with all of these Midwestern gun-toting, boot-wearing, Carhartt-wearing, Midwestern normal dads and grandpas. He's going to help Kamala Harris in her weaker position with men in the Midwest in particular. I don't think so. I think Big Ten fans are liking Trump more than Kamala. And I think when they watched this vice presidential debate, they actually had more in common with J.D. Vance than they did with Tim Walz, which leaves you asking, what in the world is Tim Walz bringing to the ticket? If Kamala loses with Minnesota, this race is not remotely close anyway. So what did he bring to the ticket? I think the answer is nothing. Trump was strategic in J.D. Vance. What does J.D. Vance bring? I think J.D. Vance, you can argue, is a much younger and more articulate advisor for Trumpism, for the MAGA movement. And what do I mean by that? Trump gets to the right result. He's right on almost everything. But in the process of getting to that result, he creates, because he's a bull in a china shop, a huge mess around him. And in fact, it's interesting, if you look at most of the criticisms of Trump, they aren't about his actual policies. They're about how he gets to the arguments that he makes to get to his policies. This is why people say, oh, fact checking is so important. Look, I'll give you an example. In my interview with Trump on Saturday, Trump said, man, big-time college football, I've heard all about it, I'm paraphrasing him, is a different kind of experience than the NFL. Because I asked him, hey, what would you tell somebody who's never been to a big-time college football game, what the experience is like? Because you've been to several now. And he said, man, it's incredible. Again, I'm paraphrasing. It's a different experience than the NFL. There's 125,000 people out here in this stadium, okay? The number might be, somebody, Adam, you can look it up. My guess is there's roughly 100,000 people in Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday. So when Trump said 125,000, it wasn't an accurate reflection of what the attendance was, because the attendance was, let's say it's 20,000 or 25,000 less. But everything he said about big-time college football was right. A lot of what happens with Trump is they fact-check hyperbole. They fact-check him layering on the awesomeness surrounding whatever his opinion is, and they don't actually attack the opinion itself. And so Kamala and Walz, on the other hand, are lying about things that have to do directly with policy. Like whether you agree or disagree with Trump, for instance, on the border, or how much border wall he officially built, the idea of border security and restricting the amount of people that come into the country he's committed to, he's right on that issue. What Kamala and Walz are often arguing, they're wrong on the ultimate issue, and they're trying to finesse their arguments to make people believe they believe things that they don't. And that, to me, is far more important. It's far more important to me where you end up and are you right on the ultimate issue than does every single line add up along the way. And what I think J.D. Vance does is he doesn't create the same bull in a china shop impact as Trump does. He's not as sensational. He's not as good at getting attention, but he may be better at articulating as a spokesperson exactly what the numbers and the values of Trump are. By the way, attendance for Alabama, 100,077 for the Georgia-Alabama game. Okay? So, again, Trump's right about everything, I think, when it comes to analyzing big-time college football. He's a little bit wrong on attendance. Why should there be any need to kind of address that? What's more important, the substance of the argument or the process by which you get there? I would argue whether you're right or wrong on the big issue. Let me also hit you with this. So I think J.D. Vance had a real appeal with Big Ten voters. I think he also did really well with women. And this is important. I mentioned him talking about how much he respected and was impressed by the accomplishments of his wife. He also has 3 young kids. J.D. Vance is what left-wing women actually want. This is something that they don't want to acknowledge. Left-wingers live right and they talk left. What do I mean by that? If you are left-wing and you went to an elite college or a law school, what do? In general, you get married to one person, you have a family, you have a nuclear family unit, husband, wife, you have oftentimes kids attending quote-unquote elite schools, you oftentimes live in a suburb or a gated community that is very, very safe. You have a lifestyle that is actually extolled by the right. Get married, have kids, live in good neighborhoods with outstanding schools. All of the things that people on the right, you might well go to church. All of the things that people on the right advocate for. You want your kids to go to college. You want your kids to wait to get married till to have kids till after they get married. All of the things that people on the right argue for and that people on the left argue against, People on the left actually live right. Pay attention to it. You'll see it so much. And there is, I think, if you want to criticize, one reason I think young women are so unhappy is there aren't enough men that can rise to the ideal that the average woman aspires to. There was something that went viral recently, and I don't have it in front of me, but a girl put out what she wanted her husband, her ideal life mate, to be like, right? If most women, most, not all, most women want to marry a guy who is 6 foot tall or taller, a guy who is in good physical shape, and makes 6 figures or more. Those are like the 3 most important criteria for most women out there. They want a tall guy, they want a fit, strong guy, and they want a guy who makes over 6 figures a year. Almost every woman, whether it's the most dyed-in-the-wool liberal or whether it's the most conservative woman. J.D. Vance. And I think there is a cognitive dissonance that hit for a lot of women where they were told, oh, J.D. Vance is this awful boogeyman. And if you were a single woman watching Tim Walz and J.D. Vance side by side, who do you think most women would rather be married to? The teacher who used to coach high school football and looks like he's 75 years old and kind of has weird theatrical mannerisms, or J.D. Vance? I think it's J.D. And I think that registered with some women. They won't admit it, but they actually liked it. And you know what else they liked? The left-wing women are going to claim they didn't like it. I loved when J.D. Vance fact-checked the moderators. Oftentimes, I'm being honest with you, a lot of people in media are morons. Some of you are going to say I'm one of them. That's fair. You can have whatever opinion you want of me. I don't do anything off a prompter. I'm telling you, having been in a lot of television studios over the years, there are a lot of people that if their a lot of media people and politicians, that if their teleprompter went down, they would not be able to handle a live broadcast. And when those women got challenged on being wrong factually, and they turned J.D. Vance's mic off, I said, this thing is a wash. J.D. Vance has won. As soon as they had to turn his mic off, they were acknowledging that they were wrong. They got fact-checked themselves, and they were embarrassed by the way that fact-check went. And that's why they turned his mic off and Waltz's mic off. That was having to do with the border crossing numbers. Now, let's talk about the moderators for a minute. Buck made a good point on the show. Everybody was saying, oh, there's one thing that's always true. When you complain about the refs, you lost. I'm going to complain about the refs here. That was the big talk after the Trump debate against Kamala, was the ABC moderators were such a disaster. They turned into the primary story. CBS moderators were a disaster too, and J.D. Vance still won. He had to go 3-on-1, and he was still able to rise to the occasion and win. The amount of left-wing bias in the questions staggers me still. The only way, I believe this, the only way to have fair debates going forward, and I would argue Republicans have to do this, is you have to have someone who is, quote, right-wing to go against somebody else, because all the rest of the media is left-wing. I will put out my perspective again. I've been arguing for it. I think it makes a lot of sense. Every question of the Democrat should come from the selected moderator of the Republican nominee. And every question of the Republican should come from the selected moderator of the Democrat. Because the questions are so rigged, the things that are left out are so substantial. It is not a fair process that is underway by any stretch of the imaginations. The moderator slant from CBS was yet again Nora O'Donnell, Margaret Brennan, I think were the two women, far left wing, but I loved when J.D. Vance fact-checked them. Now, the worst moment, I would argue, of any of the entire debate was when Tim Walz got asked why he lied about going to Tiananmen Square. And he started off by talking about how he liked to ride his bike in his neighborhood and eventually just said basically that he was a nincompoop. I can't remember the exact word that he used to describe his own inability to tell the truth. But I do think this is where actual fact-checking matters. When you are lying, and I'm not talking about making a political argument, I'm talking about when you're caught in a lie. Tim Walz claimed that he served in combat and carried weapons in war. That was a lie. In his CNN interview sitting alongside of Kamala Harris, he claimed that that was just an example of how he's not always great with his grammar. He lied in his initial congressional campaign and claimed that he did not actually get a DUI. Then later he admitted that he did get a DUI. There is ample evidence that he lied about his rank. He was not actually a command sergeant major. And that he lied about when he made the decision not to deploy to Iraq with his unit. And he also lied, it appears, about the frequency of his trips to China and when, in fact, he was in China, because now he admits that he was not in China during Tiananmen Square. All of that is kind of crazy, and I think is indicative that Tim Walz in general is a liar about things that actually matter, not someone who is misstating facts in an effort to get to a conclusion that he thinks matters. I mentioned that woman who went viral. She said her ideal man, 6 foot, good facial bone structure, 120 plus IQ, deep voice, funny, assertive, cowboy personality, income over $130,000. I would argue that J.D. Vance might well fit that entire criteria. And I think a lot of women who are single are angry at the world because they can't find a man that fulfills their desired criteria. And if they were watching that debate, I think there was a cognitive dissonance afoot where they said, wait a minute, this guy that I've been told is awful and that I bought into as a Handmaid's Tale is actually everything that I want in a man, and I just think it's funny to contemplate there. But Tim Walz, disaster answer on China, talking about riding his bike and how he basically just wouldn't admit that he got it wrong, was a slow-moving disaster. Okay, a couple of other things. Doug Emhoff is the husband of Kamala Harris. In a story in the Daily Mail that came out this morning, Doug Emhoff is accused in 2012 at a high-end VIP party of slapping his girlfriend in the face so hard that it made her spin around because she was upset. He was upset with her for supposedly flirting with somebody else. Now, Doug Emhoff is also it seems quite clear that he has admitted it, that he got the family nanny pregnant, and that was why his first marriage came to a close. So we're talking about a guy who got his nanny pregnant and physically assaulted his girlfriend in 2012 when he would have been well into his 40s. We're not talking about like an 18-year-old getting into a dispute with his girlfriend. We're talking about a guy in his 40s getting into a fight with his girlfriend at a high-end event and slapping her so hard that it made her spin around. So they've tried to define Doug Emhoff as some sort of redefinition of masculinity. And in fact, he has come out and lectured other men on toxic masculinity. I would submit to you that getting your nanny pregnant and physically assaulting a woman, hitting her, is actually the very definition of toxic masculinity, and that if we had an honest media, they would ask Kamala Harris, in light of these allegations, has Doug Emhoff ever struck you? Do you still believe, whatever her answer is there, they should have to ask her. They should also ask her if she still believes all women, since her husband got a nanny pregnant and also now is accused of slapping and hitting another woman. Now, I think this matters because Doug Emhoff has put himself in the criteria by trying to argue that he is in some way some paragon of masculinity. I think a lot of times these guys are complete shams, complete liars. I think that is reflecting. One other thing, and I have not seen the response, but Tim Walz claimed that he was friends with school shooters, which is a moment that has gone mega viral. I actually presumed in the debate that he was saying that he had befriended school shooting victims. But I don't know that he's even been – I was giving him the benefit of the doubt there and just giving him like, hey, maybe he has just totally screwed that up. I don't even understand what he was trying to say if it was anything other than that. But I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt, although I hear that he's now trying to clear that up and hasn't been able to do it. Okay. Political U.S. betting is now legal according to court rulings. You guys know I love following the gambling odds more than I like following the polls. In the wake of the debate, we have basically a exact dead heat in who is going to win the presidential race. As I speak to you right now, 1.1 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars has been bet on Polymarket, which is the biggest political gambling marketplace. Kamala Harris, 49%. Donald Trump, 49%. Essentially no difference at all here. Who's going to win the race could not be tighter than it is right now. 49, as I'm speaking to you, 49.5% chance that Kamala wins, 49.4% chance that Trump wins. So Kamala's advantage, which she has had since the Kamala-Trump debate effectively, is now gone after the VP debate. And as we sit here 34 days until the election, it is a complete dead heat. And maybe we'll have more gambling markets out there going forward. I rarely do this, but I'm going to give the New York Times some credit. I don't know if you can read this, but I'm holding up. This is the Monday New York Times opinion page. Someone named Stannis Elborg. I don't know. I can't believe this exists. A senior analyst at Play the Game, an initiative promoting democracy, transparency, and freedom of expression in sport. I don't know who funded this, but the headline is the NBA chooses hoops over human rights. I believe that the goal of media should be to speak truth to power. Adam Silver's NBA is opening with games in Abu Dhabi this weekend, preseason games. The United Arab Emirates, which is where they are playing, has among the lowest countries globally. I'm reading from the New York Times editorial, with a freedom index score of just 18 out of 100. That classifies as not free when it comes to basic human rights. And there is all sorts of issues that are totally awful. Qatar, which hosted the World Cup, ranks 25. And there's been a ton of criticism of Qatar, almost nothing about the United Arab Emirates. Again, Friday and Sunday, Celtics and Nuggets are going to play preseason games, part of a broad multi-year deal. So, my question that should be asked of Adam Silver, and I don't know if there's any actual sports media journalists that cover the NBA that have the stones to ask it, is, Adam Silver, you pulled the All-Star game out of Charlotte, North Carolina, because you said the transgender bathroom bill there was so unacceptable that the NBA couldn't play its All-Star game in the state of North Carolina. How then can you justify taking tons of money to travel to the United Arab Emirates, where there are no basic human rights, and allow your games to be played there? Were you wrong to have pulled the All-Star game? Would you like to apologize to people in the state of North Carolina for the decision that you made? Because this is an untenable conflict for the NBA. Either the NBA has to come out and say, look, we believe basketball is designed to speak to people from a variety of different cultures, whether it's China, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's the United States, anywhere in the world. We believe the language of basketball brings people together and should be celebrated. And our goal, as the foremost proponent of basketball, is to bring our sport to as many people and from as many different walks of life as possible, even if some of those countries have different political perspectives and human rights standards than the United States. It's not the job of the NBA to make political statements around the world. If that is the NBA's new perspective, that's fine, but Adam Silver needs to announce it. Because otherwise, it is untenable hypocrisy for the NBA to be lecturing all of us on politics like they were in 2020 when they put BLM on the court, like they were when they put political slogans on the back of jerseys, like they were when they pulled the All-Star game out of Charlotte, North Carolina over a transgender bathroom bill. It is untenable for the NBA to go to the UAE where homosexuality is punishable by a death sentence. How do they reconcile that? And how in the world is Adam Silver not answering those questions? Adam Silver, to play games in the UAE, in my opinion, should have to apologize to every basketball fan in America for embracing politics, left-wing politics in particular, in the United States, while totally turning his back on basic human rights around the world. If you want to just be a business, I'm fine with it. I've talked about this for a long time. You didn't hear me criticize LIV or any of the golfers that join LIV. You've never heard me criticize the WWE or the UFC for going all over the world to put on their fights, to put on their wrestling matches, to put on their golf tournaments. Because golfers, fighters, and wrestlers, all of the organizations that employ them have basically said, look, we're not in the politics business. We just want to put on good shows. We're going to go around the world and try to grow our brand. I get it. No complaints. But if you're going to be in the United States like the NBA has been, lecturing me on all of the politics here in the United States, you can't then go to a foreign country that has a scintilla of the basic human rights of the United States and not stand up for basic human rights, in my opinion. I give credit, try to be fair. New York Times calling them on it. Will anybody at ESPN? Will anybody at TNT? Will anybody that covers the NBA actually hold Adam Silver, the Celtics, and the Nuggets accountable for the hypocrisy? They should. It'll be interesting to see what ends up happening. All right. I love all of you. DBAP unless you need to SBAP. I am Clay Travis. This has been OutKick the Show. I'll be back with you tomorrow for the fade. My college football gambling picks are up. Kelly Stewart and I will do the fade, and then we'll do OutKick the Show, and that will close out the week for OutKick the Show. Appreciate all of you. Like I said, DBAP unless you need to SBAP. This has been OutKick the Show.